Hello and welcome to Community Alliance's training on housing problem solving and diversion strategies. We're super happy that you all were able to find the link. For anyone who wasn't able to attend in person, this is hopefully going to capture a lot of what we discussed, and we really look forward to having you in the next training. For anyone who's potentially watching this, just curious about diversion and or Community Alliance's work, Community Alliance is the HUD Continuum of Care lead agency for Memphis-Shelby County, and we bring in over $9 million annually to address homelessness. We help oversee that funding and ensure that agencies running housing programs meet outlined federal requirements. We also provide strategic oversight of our region's strategic plan to end homelessness, and that also includes providing technical assistance to direct service providers. And so hopefully today this is going to just generate conversation within your organization about certain strategies that may lead to effective diversion strategies when it comes to dealing with clients who may be able to self-resolve. And so with that, we'll kind of just jump right in and get some working definitions, working vocabulary for what we'll be talking about today. And so if we think about diversion, we really want to house that underneath an umbrella of housing problem solving approaches. So there's several different housing problem solving approaches that could be prevention, defined here, diversion, or rapid exit. And for the purpose of this training, we're specifically going to be talking about diversion. So looking to take people who do not have safe housing today and who are kind of on the brink of homelessness and trying to find a people-centered, person-oriented solution for them, which is determined within their own kind of ideas, capabilities. It's resolution on their own terms. And so we really want to focus on that today. So just to introduce the concept of diversion, over the last half decade, many communities have developed and implemented a uniform approach to identifying the people most in need in their communities and accelerating their access to housing and services, often through coordinated entry systems. So if you are a direct service provider, specifically in the Memphis area, you're probably familiar with the coordinated entry system and some of the assessments associated with that. And so coordinated entry really works well for many high need and high priority people who previously might not otherwise have had access to the critical services that they need. And within that coordinated entry system, their needs are really identified early, and they're being given priority for high intensity housing solutions. But unfortunately, there are many individuals who may be on the verge of homelessness or have just initially experienced a loss of shelter of where they're staying, and they don't score high enough on some of those standardized assessments to be placed in rapid rehousement or to qualify for permanent supportive housing. And so diversion really looks to take care of those individuals who may not be the highest acuity people in the community, but still need supportive services, need help in securing safe housing, and really trying to provide an alternate resource besides emergency shelter. And so, just plainly defined, diversion really is a person-centered and client-driven approach, and its goal is to help the person or household find a safe alternative housing immediately. And so when we say safe alternative housing, it's really trying to avoid placing a person in shelter due to their situation, rather than saying, oh, you're homeless, you need to enter into a shelter and then we'll take care of you. How can we work with you, work with your network, work with, maybe some of the situations that you've experienced? How can we find safe housing outside of shelter tonight? And the intention of diversion is to ensure that homelessness is as brief as possible, and to prevent unsheltered homelessness and to avert stays in a shelter. Because we do know that can be traumatic for individuals as well as families who have experienced a loss of shelter and now are in a congregate shelter with other people. And so just to kind of take all of those working definitions and really look at where diversion is in the landscape of homelessness response, I think that this graphic does a great job, because we have a highway where we're seeing people can be funneled into different housing options. There's rapid rehousing, transitional housing, permanent or supportive housing that are available, and people can go down those lanes. But diversion truly is a rerouting of individuals away from shelters and or housing programs, trying to use their networks to stabilize them, to use supports that are already available to them, and to really capitalize on those things to make the experience of homelessness as brief as possible. So if you want to take a second here, pause, read through some of these working definitions of all of these programs. But I think the main reason that we've included this picture on the slide is to give you a visual of that diverting, the rerouting of individuals within a diversion approach. So why diversion? The intent of diversion is to give someone who has become homeless a positive alternative to entering an emergency shelter or being unsheltered. And diversion is also much more effective than from the perspective of homeless services systems and ending homelessness, rather than being funneled through and kind of recycled in different programs looking to alleviate homelessness. So if we can make that experience of homelessness brief, allow someone the opportunity to connect to resources, get back on their feet, and get on with their life, that's really what we're looking to do, rather than have a sustained and long-term experience of homelessness. So here you'll see kind of the working definitions fleshed out again in a photo format, where we see prevention is people who are at risk of homelessness, and we prevent homelessness from occurring. But diversion is an individual has become homeless, and you have, as a caseworker, case manager, outreach worker, connected them to safer alternatives rather than an emergency shelter. Diversion here really takes a person-centered approach. It's all about having exploratory conversations that help find safe and stable housing options. And those options are identified through conversation with the individual, with the client. And so, in having these conversations, you're looking to, one, understand what caused a person's housing crisis. You want to explore the immediate solutions to the crisis that may be possible, and then help them pursue solutions. So that is both immediate and long-term. Even if those individuals are diverted and they don't end up in any kind of rapid rehousing program or permanent supportive housing, there's still continued conversation saying, hey, I'm going to help you get out of this crisis right now, but we're also going to do some legwork to make sure that this never happens again. So creating long-term solutions, but using immediate quick fixes to help get us there. And this approach really allows us to leverage community-based housing and supports outside of the homeless response system. So if you're an individual or a service organization that is interacting with individuals who may have experienced homelessness, they're coming to you looking for supportive services, they're looking for resources, diversion is a great option and a great approach to having conversations with individuals where you may not have access to some of these assessments or housing lists that homeless service providers may have access to. But what you can do is engage in conversations with individuals saying, how can I help you understand what the options are that you have within your network, within your community, within kind of even existing relationships that you may have had with a previous landlord, etc. And so, that is really diversion at work. It is having this people-centered conversation, looking to understand causes of homelessness and the immediate crisis, and looking to suggest solutions. So within those conversations that you may be having as either a direct service provider or someone who is maybe working in a sector that I would call homeless adjacent, maybe you're working in healthcare and you're seeing that an individual has come to you with some kind of ailment, maybe you're working in an ER and they don't have a place to return to whenever they're exiting the ER, rather than having a conversation of saying, well, are you willing to get help from this shelter down the street? Why don't you start to have a conversation shift and think about, how can I be a collaborator with this client, and thinking about how can we think together and creatively about what are the solutions that we have in front of us. So, without diversion, a conversation may take a kind of limiting approach, in the sense the question may say, are you willing to enter shelter or receive a motel voucher? Here, this person, this caseworker, this whoever it could be having this conversation is really giving an individual two options, right? You can enter the shelter, you can receive a motel voucher. That's all I've got for you. But with diversion, and with diversion as an approach in our conversations, maybe the question looks more like, what can we do today to keep you from becoming or remaining homeless? Here, the options are limitless, right? And it's determined by an individual themselves. Well, here are my options. Here's what I can think of. Here's who I know that maybe I can reach out to. And in a lot of ways, maybe these options are more safe for individuals. It's people that they feel comfortable with. There's a history. There is the lack of the traumatic experience of even entering a shelter. So really, diversion is not so much a concrete methodology, but it's a shifting conversation. And the rest of these examples kind of show you that subtle but important shift of what it looks like to help a client resolve their housing crisis issue within their own terms. Of course, we understand as a agency working to ameliorate homelessness that, there are significant barriers to implementing these strategies as well. And we believe that all staff should have training in skills like mediation, negotiation, conflict resolution, active listening, which is huge here in diversion, and strengths-based approaches. Ideally, organizations would also have access to flexible financial resources for things like rental assistance, transportation, utilities, and deposits. Oftentimes people who are on the brink of homelessness or may have experienced homelessness are really one paycheck away from getting back into stable housing. Maybe they need a bus ticket to get to family who lives in another state. Maybe it is that they couldn't keep the lights on and they paid for, grocery bills were exorbitant this month, and something happened with the utilities. So really having access to flexible financial resources is huge for engaging with diversion as an approach. And so we understand it as an organization that finances and funds a lot of programs that it's often really difficult to find these flexible funds within federal grants. And so this is where it can be a huge asset to have private donors, philanthropic donors, or even kind of grant foundation money that may be a little bit more flexible and useful in these situations. And obviously, another thing we want to reiterate here is that every person who lost their housing and is seeking homelessness assistance should be immediately engaged in diversion, intervention, and conversation. And the focus of that conversation should be on that person's housing options. So this is really where any community-based service is going to take a client-centered approach. And, no matter what the financial situation of a organization, we do believe that all staff who are working with clients that may be in the situation, we really want them to encourage them to take a diversion approach and in the conversations that they're having, as a way of honoring that person's and that individual's choices and giving them options, in resolving their housing crisis. If these options are not acceptable for any reason, staff should be prepared to provide information on shelter options and take necessary steps to arrange shelter for a client if it is available. Diversion should never be a mechanism for denying access to available shelter, but rather one for finding a better alternative than shelter or the street. So again, here is, just some subtle conversation shifts that could be used within taking a diversion approach and what we would call here an empowerment approach, taking a client-centered approach in having conversations that are related to housing problem solving. In engaging in these conversations with a client, a lot of the feedback that we had at the in-person version of this training is that oftentimes a client will name 3, 4, 5 solutions as they're telling you their story, but they are in such a state of fight or flight, of panic, because they have lost their housing, that they're too blind to see it, right? Like that they can't see that they just named 4 friends who may let them stay on their couch. And so, once you're able to let that client tell their story, express that you are here to support them, to keep them safe, to provide them with options, some of these conversation prompts may really be helpful in discovering what are this person's unique and available resources that may be part of the solution of resolving their housing crisis. So questions like, who have been your biggest supports in times of crisis? Is it a family member? Is it a close friend? Is it a coworker? What have you already tried to help the situation? Have you called a landlord, your previous landlord? Have you spoken with a previous employer? Kind of questions along those lines, understanding the lay of the land. And then, the list continues on to say, where are some places you stayed before you were in a shelter? What has worked for you before if you were in a similar situation? Really just kind of engaging in questions that provide alternatives that may reveal how this person has handled situations like this before, if they've ever been in one. And as an active listener, using those active listening skills and taking a strengths-based approach here, as a caseworker, as an outreach worker, what you really want to be listening for is like, did they mention that they recently rented a place, that they had stayed with someone in the past, that friends or family live out of state, and maybe they're just one state line away from getting to a safe place, or maybe they have potential options but need some creative solutions to make it work. So again, here you're just actively listening for what are some unique solutions that maybe they've even proposed to me. They're just in too much of a state of frenzy to really kind of work these things out on their own. How can I help? And maybe that's where you make a call to a landlord, make a call to a friend and say, hey, my friend here is really struggling. I was wondering if they could stay on your couch for a week, and work to get those supportive services in place while providing a safe alternative to emergency shelter. And so kind of just to wrap up and conclude, when we think about diversion as a housing problem solving approach, it demands a lot of things. And there is let's say a perfect storm to create client-centered solutions, but it's going to emphasize things like flexible funds, job and education supports, creative brainstorming, conflict resolution, potentially relocation, and maybe even having a conversation with a landlord about, you know, resolving an issue that previously took place, or providing supportive services, engaging in a conversation, or finding a place of finding a housing alternative where there is a landlord mediation fund in place. You know, maybe someone has been denied housing because of an eviction notice, or something on their record, really working with landlords to create a safe environment for individuals to be able to thrive. And all of these parts are essential to engaging in diversion, right? It's not just a conversation that takes place one time, but it's a conversation that helps resolve something immediate and allows for you to engage in a long-term relationship with a client, providing supportive services. Here is just a list of COC resources that we have within our continuum of care at the Community Alliance for the Homeless. Of course, we want to encourage anyone watching to participate in the COC Outreach Committee meetings. Those happen weekly on Wednesday mornings at 9. The first Wednesday of the month is in person. The other 3 are virtual. If you have any questions about getting involved in those, feel free to reach out to Kirsten. Her email is listed below. She runs those meetings. Also, you are always welcome to reach out to Julie. Her email is also listed. She is the COC Planning Director. Participation also in our annual symposium on ending homelessness, which is slated for August 2023, is a great option if this is something you're interested in learning more about, looking to engage with other direct service providers about how they are using these strategies to resolve housing crises for individuals. Always feel free to reach out to other COC funded agencies. A full list is available on our website. I previously mentioned that you could contact Julie or Kirsten. And then there are several other resources listed here that come from a national level. So HUD's resources for housing problem solving, and the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Their website has some great resources on ending homelessness, and specifically working with diversion as a way to provide safer alternatives to shelter. So I just want to say thank you so much for your attention today. If you are located in Memphis and looking to engage with other direct service providers, our next training session is going to be January 19th of the new year, 2023, from 12 to 1:15 at our office. It's 2670 Union Avenue. We'll have a guest speaker from Alliance Healthcare Services who will be speaking on the available supports that are available in our community, as well as kind of just some basic training on reducing stigma, eliminating barriers for individuals who may suffer from mental illness. If you're unable to attend that, we will post a video, and so be looking for that email soon. Thank you again for your attention, and I hope this has been helpful and useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.